Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video that I found to be very particularly interesting. And for those of you, of course, that know my channel, usually this is a channel that is based around that of the fight game. That's why overall my channel name is at a boxing realist. But anyways, when it comes down to it, of course, for those of you that also have been around my channel long enough, you know that every once in a while, I also will talk about that of NFL football, NBA basketball, the UFC, which I don't tend to quite talk about as much. And also, of course, one of my more favorite sports, that of the ATP circuit, or that of professional tennis. But NFL is a sport that I've been watching now, especially ever since I've been growing up, really for the past 10 plus years. And of course, there's been many great quarterbacks or many great talents or many great storylines throughout that era. But anyways, for those of you overall that don't really know my background, or at least overall, who my favorite player was growing up and who my favorite team was, and still someone is, it was actually that of the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers, of course, for those of you that know the quarterback that they had throughout that era, it was out of Cam Newton. And the thought always was that eventually, at least with certain people, and I thought this as well because that was when I was in my teenage years, was that Cam Newton eventually would kind of take over the league, or that was the type of quarterback that you would want, because not only is he a throwing type of quarterback, but he can use his athleticism and run whenever he needs to. And all that sounds very nice and dandy. All that sounds well and good. But at the end of the day, most of the quarterbacks that do a lot of running within that of the NFL, the reason why they do a lot of running is usually because they're not quite up to par in terms of the throwing ability as some of the other elite pocket passing quarterbacks. Now, don't get me wrong, you still will have to have maybe a little bit of running ability, or at least a little bit of scrambling ability. Scrambling is more important than the ability to probably be on the run, like that of a Patrick Mahomes, like that of a Aaron Rodgers, like that maybe a little bit of a Josh Allen to a certain degree, or whoever else, you want to compare it to. But the thing is about Lamar Jackson, of course, is that there was a great amount of pressure on him within this season, because he more than likely was going to get the MVP after having the best record within that of the league. And now, after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs, not only is he not going to the Super Bowl once again, but there may even be questions to a certain amount of people about if he truly is the rightful MVP. Now, personally, I don't mind Lamar Jackson getting the MVP. I would probably still give it to him because he did make the AFC Championship game. He clearly had the best record and led them to the best record within that of the NFL. Of course, the defense also was great as well. There's no doubt about it, at least from what I remember. But at the end of the day, what Lamar Jackson, what the question really was, is that could he get that monkey off of his back? Could he finally get the pressure off of his shoulders to not only make it to the AFC Championship game, but to possibly make and win the Super Bowl? And of course, after this season, what the answer was no. And that doesn't mean that maybe he won't ever win a Super Bowl. But there is questions and there is doubts overall about if he ever is going to win the Super Bowl. And the truth is about Lamar Jackson is just like Cam Newton, just like Colin Kaepernick, and just like some of the other rushing quarterbacks of the day. Usually those type of quarterbacks, even though they can be super, uber talented, at the end of the day, there's usually a reason why they never end up winning the Super Bowl. And it's usually because they don't have the type of intelligence, or at least overall the type of skill set overall to win that of a Super Bowl. Because how many running or rushing quarterbacks do we really know that became all-time great quarterbacks and Hall of Famers? I mean, maybe Randall Cunningham, but other than that, who? And I don't think Randall Cunningham ever won a Super Bowl. So at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson and his type of style, it seems pretty, and it seems overall like the next step of evolution to some people. And I used to think the same exact thing with that of Cam Newton and some of the other quarterbacks of the day. But at the end of the day, it is very apparent, at least for as long as the NFL is around, that the most important skill out of a quarterback is going to be decisive and overall intelligent and accurate throwing decisions. It just is what it is. And Lamar Jackson once again showed yesterday, and a bunch of people, of course, are saying that it was a choke job and all sort of stuff. In my opinion, Lamar Jackson did not choke. And I know a lot of people will be saying, what are you talking about? He had that of the best regular season. He had that overall, of the best stats and all sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson, all he showed me is what I already knew about him, which is that, he's a decently great quarterback. He's a guy that is extremely talented. And I think, to be honest with you, that he comes across to me as a very good leader of his team. He isn't super emotional, and he's a guy that I think is very positive and carries himself well. But at the end of the day, you still need some of the skills to pay the bills. And I don't really consider this a choke job because what Lamar Jackson did yesterday, I don't think overall that there was anything that he did that was outside of his skill set or that wasn't apparent with him. Lamar Jackson, in my view, pretty much reached his peak yesterday in terms of what he can do with the football. It is what it is. He's just not a super accurate thrower in terms of making some of those needle, through the, thread the needle passes, or some of those passes that really need to be accurate. If you force him to throw deep enough, eventually they will be outthrown by that of several to 10 yards at certain times. Sometimes he can underthrow it. Sometimes he can overthrow it. Just like that what of Cam Newton did against the Denver Broncos in that of the Super Bowl. And eventually, if you put enough pressure on that type of quarterback, eventually, overall, and if you keep them from running, eventually their flaws are going to show through. And there was a great amount of questions about Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy especially, and what they were going to bring to the table. But the difference is that Brock Purdy, at least against out of the Lions and some of the other teams, now to be fair, those are not the Kansas City Chiefs, but Brock Purdy shined brighter than what Lamar Jackson did. But Brock Purdy, in my view, at least from what I see, is a better thrower of the football than what Lamar Jackson is, which is still the most important and valuable skill set of that of any quarterback. But of course, the question is about Lamar Jackson right now. Is he a fraudulent player? Is he a guy that, clearly is not that great of a quarterback? Will he ever win a Super Bowl? Is he super overrated? What is the thing about Lamar Jackson? And what makes him, lose that of the AFC Championship game? And I'm just going to state this really quickly before we get into the video. I'm not going to call Lamar Jackson a fraud necessarily, because I don't think that, I can say with what he's done that he's a fraud necessarily. But there's very clearly a difference in level between him and Patrick Mahomes, and in my view, even in some of the other quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, to be fair, he's made the AFC Championship, when it comes down to it, but there are certain quarterbacks that I would pick over him, not just Patrick Mahomes. I would pick Patrick Mahomes over him. I would pick Josh Allen over him. I would pick Joe Burrow over him. I would probably pick Brock Purdy over him, at least debatably. And there might be a couple of other, quarterbacks that maybe I would pick over him. Not that Lamar Jackson is not extremely valuable, but once again, whenever he seems to face a great team in the playoffs, he just can't seem to get past them. It is what it is. But anyways, let's review the video. Let's see what Skip Bayless, Michael Irvin, and also that Keyshawn Johnson have to say about it, because they're going to bring up some points here that I thought were very interesting.
Yes. I said last week there was far more pressure on Lamar Jackson as the home favorite and runaway MVP than there was on even Patrick Mahomes. So Michael Irvin made the case Friday. Lamar just had to win this game to keep the old narratives from rearing their ugly heads. Michael, how do you think Lamar's performance yesterday will impact his reputation as a quarterback?
Well, and that's an interesting word.
Before Michael Irvin continues, if you were just to ask me that question about how it's going to impact his reputation or his resume, I mean, it's going to impact it, of course, to a certain degree. But at the end of the day, it never told me anything about Lamar Jackson that I didn't already know. And don't get me wrong, this is not saying that I don't think that he can win the Super Bowl later on down the line. But the question is that I don't even know how long Lamar Jackson is really going to be around for. With a lot of these quarterbacks, they only last about 10 to 11 years, sometimes even if that, because eventually they may get, busted up ankles, busted up knees, a torn ACL, like that of Cam Newton eventually. Where Cam Newton, he didn't have a torn ACL, I believe, but at the end of the day, he had multiple surgeries on his ankles. He had problems with his shoulders. He had a problem with that because he took so much damage to his body. Now, to be fair, Cam Newton used more of his body because he was a 6'5" monster at 250 pounds. He used his body a lot of the times as a battering ram. And sometimes, he would use his body a little bit too much. And on top of that, he had one of the worst offensive lines within that of the whole entire league. So at the end of the day, he would just get hit way too much. I think he was like the most hit quarterback, but that was also partially his fault as well. The thing is with Lamar Jackson is at least he knows kind of how to avoid some of those hits, but he still has to be very careful.
Reputation as a quarterback, because we know what Lamar wants. Lamar wants to be able to say he did it his way and stayed who he is the whole way through all of this process. I go back and say I saw such growth in Lamar this year. And I don't think it'll damage him in the future as I look at it, because when you think about it, the Peyton Mannings, they struggled before they finally came out and won their first Super Bowl. I think Peyton Manning was like 5 and 6, first 8 years in the playoffs.
Well, here's the thing also as well, and that's that's not the worst point by Michael Irvin, and that's why I have Peyton Manning not as my first or second greatest quarterback of all time. I have my third greatest quarterback of all time. And one of my best friends heavily disagrees with me. He thinks that Joe Montana was a system quarterback, and that and that overall that Peyton Manning is clearly ahead of him, and blah blah blah. No, Joe Montana was an all-time great quarterback. And even when they won with Steve Young eventually, which was almost kind of like a Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers situation, but probably even greater, because Joe Montana was greater than what either of those quarterbacks were. But when it comes down to it, Joe Montana, no, all-time great quarterback. And with what he delivered, in repeated Super Bowls, and the fact that he never lost a Super Bowl, and the fact that he also was one of the most statistically significant of his day and had the best accuracy and had the best touchdown to interception ratio. No, Joe Montana was a real deal quarterback for sure. But at the end of the day, Peyton Manning, great all-time, quarterback. But he a lot of the times did have problems with pressurized situations. But the thing is about Peyton Manning is that he still had that great throwing talent. He still had a great arm, and on top of that, he could throw the football somewhat accurately. The thing is about Lamar Jackson, he's not a Peyton Manning. He's not a Tom Brady. He's not a Drew Brees. He's not an Aaron Rodgers. He's none of those guys to where he throws the ball very accurately when he needs to. Lamar Jackson is along that same ilk with Cam Newton, kind of Colin Kaepernick, and those guys. Now, he might eventually become the greatest rushing quarterback to ever exist, or he might eventually become a better pocket passer, but at the current moment in time, until he's able to get to that Super Bowl and is able to win that Super Bowl, these same criticisms are always going to come up, because at the end of the day, they've always proven to be true.
A bunch of high seeds, too.
Right, a bunch of high seeds and everything. So, but Tom Brady was also in his way in that time. So, Lamar still has time, but you can still see where I hope Lamar says, there's still room to grow here. I have to understand right here when to stay in this pocket, when to go and use this great gift God gave me, my legs, and run. I love fighters. I always say, man, I want a fighter any kind of way. But I want you to be a great fighter, but I want you to know when and who to fight. That's how we'll really win. I want Lamar to stay in the pocket, do what he's doing. But at that time, he needs to make a better decision and go right then and start making plays. So I think he'll still get this opportunity. He'll see Patrick Mahomes again. They'll be right back here again. He has to improve on those decisions.
Well, I'm not quite sure 100% if they're going to be right back there again. You would have to say that they're going to win as many games as what they did again this year and get the first seed, or possibly even get there. Because of the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, let's be real. They made it out of the first round because they were the #1 seed and ranked as the #1 team in the league. So they already made it out of there. And then the second round, they get the Houston Texans, which, I'm not saying that they don't have some talent, but let's be real. No one thought that the Houston Texans were going to make the AFC Championship here. So if we really take a look at Lamar Jackson's resume, what really, in terms of playoff wins, does he actually have other than beating the Tennessee Titans, who he probably should have beaten in the first place, but they ended up losing to, the first time that Lamar made the playoffs. And then, of course, he ends up beating out of the Houston Texans. But every team that has a major threat, especially at a quarterback position, like that at Josh Allen or like that at Patrick Mahomes, he can never beat them, at least in terms of that of the postseason.
He grew a lot this year. And I think from this playoff loss, he should grow a lot. And that should help him get over this hump in the playoffs.
You asked Michael that question, and Michael and I watched the game, obviously, yesterday together. Yep. And we were having this conversation throughout the course of the game.
The fans where you were they pro?
It was a little bit of everything up there. A little bit of everything.
But love the Chiefs, a lot of Chiefs fans.
A lot of Chiefs fans, yeah. And so the conversation was, what does this mean? What are the people outside of Baltimore in the building going to say? Well, the first thing the people are going to say is choke. That's what they're going to say. Now, like Michael said,
a lot of people certainly are going to say choke. Once again, to me, for it to be a choke, I have to believe that your skill set was higher than what you showed. And I don't think that Lamar Jackson has a higher skill set, at least at the moment, than what I've seen from him yesterday. At the end of the day, when you talk about those type of quarterbacks, when you have the right defensive game plan and when you're after them and when you're able to blitz them and when you're able to rush them, it was pretty much the same exact game plan that I believe Wade Phillips, I believe that was his name, had against that of Cam Newton in Super Bowl 50, where he said, we're going to blitz Cam Newton as much as we can, and we're going to get him, basically, we're going to get our dogs after him as much as possible, and we're going to go, overall after that, and we're going to hunt him down. And basically we're going to see if he can throw the football down the field as accurately as possible under pressure. Can he do it? And the answer is no. And he was correct about that. So at the end of the day, that's pretty much what happened here. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're hunting dogs. They pretty much hunted after that of Lamar Jackson. They chased that deer down, and basically Lamar Jackson became somewhat of a deer in headlights with some of those things. But I don't even know if I want to say a deer in headlights necessarily. I just think that, overall he just kind of got worn out. And on top of that, you get to see what their true decision making is. And the offensive coordinator, of course, in my view, has to take a little bit of flack as well. But Lamar Jackson is just a guy to where he has to kind of have that system around him, in my view, to be super successful. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that he would not be valuable anywhere else. But in order for him to win a Super Bowl, in my view, they're going to have to create a certain amount of screens. They're going to have to create a great amount of mid-range passes. Lamar Jackson is never going to be a guy. He's never going to be a guy to where, he can thread the needle overall down long field or, overall always make the greatest decisions or the greatest of throws, in certain tight spots. It's just not going to happen. That's not who Lamar Jackson is.
Though, Skip, he has time. He's still young.
What a choke job is, in my view, is what Peyton Manning does in the playoffs, because a lot of the times what you see from him in the playoffs, he could do better overall than what he possibly is. He just overthinks it, and then on top of that, he gets way too nervous, and he chokes it. Another choke job overall is that of CP3, where he's known as the point god and all this other stuff, but then he goes to the playoffs, and he blows multiple leads, and he might do great in certain games, but then in other games, he does absolutely horrendous. Those are choke jobs, okay? But choke jobs, like a lot of people consider James Harden, a choker and all this sort of stuff. But James Harden, I'm not even sure if I consider him a choker. I mean, at times I consider him a choker, but it's just that his skill set is more limited than one might think. And then once he gets to the playoffs, when things are tougher and all his free throw bullshit, when it comes down to it, and that same bullshit don't work, and he finally faces a team where they're going to step it up a little bit in the playoffs and the intensity goes up, then all of a sudden, can he get that ball down the net? Not all the time. And it's the same thing with Lamar Jackson. The playoffs are a completely different story. They're way different from that of the regular season. So at the end of the day, once again, I can't even call it a choke. It's just that this is pretty much what I expected from that of Lamar Jackson from what I've seen.
We've seen some of the greatest players.
And another choke job you could say is Aaron Rodgers when he loses against certain teams, because he never appears as great as what he does in the playoffs at times as what he does in the regular season.
Not just quarterbacks, but some of the greatest players eventually deliver at the moments, right? We've seen it. They struggle, then all of a sudden, they deliver. I don't care if it's free throws in basketballs, threes in basketballs, they knocking them down. I don't care if it's field goals being missed in important games, and all of a sudden you say, well, we tried him out again, and he nails it. I think for Lamar, what he has to do is like things that Michael was saying. Play football. Don't get so caught up and consumed with, I have to be a pocket quarterback in this situation and deliver the football.
I do somewhat agree with that, because at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is not a pocket quarterback. He's never going to be. He's never going to be an elite passer. But at the end of the day, that defense was on his ass like a rash yesterday. And even though they were missing a certain amount of sacks and even some of the tackles, at the end of the day, that Kansas City defense yesterday was amazing. And, whenever Lamar is going to go up against an elite defense, he's always going to have problems. Unless the offense is somewhat able, to come up with very good mid-range, passes or screens, he's going to have a certain amount of problems.
Gaping cavities that he could insert himself into out on the football field.
Said. Yep.
We are looking at that, and you can see the hesitation. It's like, go. Because what the guy did in San Francisco, he made a decision. I can't throw. I gotta go.
One hit, two hits, I'm out.
Instead of trying to, because what happens to these style quarterbacks, and we've seen it for many years, Skip. People, the public, starts to tell them they need to be something different than what they've already been.
Yeah.
And then they start saying, well, we need to get an offensive coordinator here to teach him how to throw. He did marvelous things. He's going to win the MVP. I would be shocked if he didn't win the MVP.
Unanimously.
Well, right now, I'm not quite sure if he is 100% going to win the MVP. I would favor him to win the MVP, but if the MVP ends up going to Patrick Mahomes, don't be super shocked, because the MVP is kind of a regular season award, but at the end of the day, there's only so many times that you can fuck up, and then they end up giving the MVP award overall to the guy that they believe is the best quarterback in the league, and that clearly is Patrick Mahomes.
He'll win it. Part of him winning that, though, is he developed a certain passing game that we all complained about over the last several years. Right. And he got caught up in that. And in this situation, Had he decided he was going to pull it down and just be Lamar, the Lamar that he was 2 years ago or whatever, fine, they would have probably won this football game.
Right.
Because he left a lot of yards out on the field.
And nobody would have talked about him not sitting in the pocket.
No.
We would have talked about how brilliant it was
that he didn't. It's the same thing that we talk about with Brock Purdy, how brilliant he was, because you didn't see the moves in the past. Guess what? What he was doing on the field for the 49ers, they didn't see it till yesterday. They look at it and go, okay, we got something here. Yeah. That put a threat on that defense in Detroit. Now they got to worry about his...
You can say that all you want to about that, you know, oh, you need to become more of what you are. But at the end of the day, the playoffs, once again, is a completely different story. And that Kansas City Chiefs defense yesterday, they had an excellent game plan against that of the Baltimore Ravens. And they were getting after Lamar Jackson quite a bit. So I can understand why Lamar Jackson wasn't becoming more mobile. And he still had, I believe, about 120-something rushing yards within that game. I just think that the Kansas City defense, they had a great game plan. And Lamar's just one of those guys to where if you have a great game plan against him, and if you can limit his running ability, then basically you pretty much can beat the Baltimore Ravens, because you know damn well that he's not going to be able to throw it consistently down the field repeatedly.
Legs and his ability to throw the football in the pocket. His reputation is going to get dinged from the outside people that don't really pay attention, that just see his playoff record. I can't give him a...
Right, but the playoff record overall is the most important record. At the end of the day, I can only give you so much credit overall for that of the regular season. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Lamar Jackson is probably still the right way to go for the Baltimore Ravens. I still think that they can try some things out with him. But I'm not quite sure if they're ever going to win a Super Bowl with him. I just think that he's pretty much the best option at the moment. Because once again, those type of style of quarterbacks, they almost never win Super Bowls, if they ever have.
Ass like that, though, and just be like, oh, well, he had a bad game, man. Lamar did not play nowhere near his ability at all, and I hate to see that.
I don't agree with that. I think that he did play to his ability. I think that's what a lot of people overall are getting wrong here. I think a lot of people are saying that Lamar Jackson did not play to his ability. No, I think that Aaron Rodgers doesn't play to his full ability when he's in the playoffs. I think that Peyton Manning a lot of the times doesn't play his full ability in that of the playoffs. I think that LeBron James at times in the NBA Finals doesn't play his full ability when he's in those situations. I think that, you know, there's some other examples. CP3. Those are examples of choke jobs, in my view, because you know those players are capable of something more or putting on a better performance, at least if they didn't have the fear of potentially losing, or if they didn't have that of the choking gene when it comes down to Lamar Jackson. In my view, there's just he can't do anything better than what he did yesterday against a team like this. It just is what it is.
It pained me to watch him because I wasn't against.
Poorly.
No, he played. No, he had a bad game, man. No, he had a bad game.
I think what they called was bad. Like listen. You bad game. Zay Flowers. You want to say?
And let me also state this about Lamar Jackson, and this is why you have to be very careful. And I state this within a certain amount of my other boxing videos as well. Whenever you get on this racial shit overall about, you know, especially when in that particular sport, usually that demographic is not as dominant, at least for that position. You know, a lot of the times, of course, then a lot of people are very quick to claim racism when there's any criticisms against them or anything like that. And of course, within that of NFL history, it's mainly been dominated by that of Caucasians. You know, partially overall because, of course, certain black quarterbacks haven't gotten as many opportunities, especially within that of the older days. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Lamar Jackson, of course, he has a certain amount of the pro-racial guys and, you know, and the victimization mentality guys, you know, that are for him. And whenever there's a criticism thrown his way, you know, people overall love to claim racism and all this other stuff. And that's why you have to be very careful, because at the end of the day, look what happened at the end of the season anyway. There were so many people stating that it was racist to say that, you know, overall that he can't throw the football extremely well and that he's not a great pocket passer and all this other stuff. Well, at the end of the day, he's just not. Now, at the end of the day, you have to be still a little bit careful with what people say, because a lot of the times it can be racially motivated with what someone's saying. But you have to take a look at it, you know, and say, okay, is this really something that is completely racially motivated, or is there something that, you know, there's a decent amount of substance here? And when you're saying something like Lamar Jackson, a lot of the times doesn't show up anywhere as good as what he does, you know, in the regular season is what he does in the playoffs, you know, when it comes, or, you know, in the playoffs is what he does in the regular season, you know, that's not something that's racist. That's something that can be proven with factual information. to say that he's not a great pocket passer and that he's not the most accurate passer, especially when pressure is put on him. That's not a racist thing to say. So far, that has proven to be true, and it proved to be true yesterday. So that's why, once again, you have to be very careful with that mentality, because it'll completely poison your mind to over-emotionality, to where you can't see logic or objectivity whatsoever.
Had a bad game.
Yes.
That's a bad game. Because Lamar gave him opportunities to win the game.
And that interception that he fucking threw yesterday at the end of that game, I mean, like, you know, there may have been a little bit of pass interference. I don't know. But at the end of the day, dude, you threw at that ball in, like, triple fucking coverage. Like, what are you doing?
Yes,
So I can't say he had a horrible game.
Yeah, but I'm not
And let me give Lamar Jackson this. I certainly have a lot more faith in him than what I ever would have in Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, or Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, I would have more faith in him over than what I would in those quarterbacks. You know, so I will give him that. He definitely, overall, you know, is a top 10 quarterback. But at the end of the day, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, Lamar Jackson, I think, you know, I think overall that, you know, I'm just not quite sure if he's ever going to be on that level to where he's going to be officially the best quarterback in the league.
looking at one or two
And to win a Super Bowl, I think that a lot of the times you need a quarterback that is like that.
plays. I'm looking at the course of the game, Michael, for him. His standards where he was set. Because when I'm going in this game from the beginning of the season, I picked the Baltimore Ravens to go to the Super Bowl.
You did.
At the beginning of the season. Not in the playoffs, but at the beginning of the
And
season.
let me tell you what, I also picked that of the Baltimore Ravens to beat that of the Kansas City Chiefs. I originally picked the Kansas City Chiefs, but the thing that was scaring me a little bit was that of the Baltimore Ravens defense. You know, I did not expect the Kansas City Chiefs defense to play as lights out as what they did. They played absolute lights out defense, so they were absolutely phenomenal. And that's what pretty much won Kansas City the game, as well as Patrick Mahomes as well.
I'm not against Patrick Mahomes. I just was for Lamar Jackson because I wanted to see him so badly win to shut up all the people that say he can't win it. But now you got to open.
Well, at the end of the day, those criticisms, they're going to be louder than ever. Because at the end of the day, once again, so many people were claiming that there's so much hate on Lamar Jackson and there's so much this and there's so much that. But was it really hate or was it just the truth all along? And that's why, once again, you have to take a look at it. And you have to be very careful when you get in that over-emotional attitude or that victimization. But a lot of this also stems, once again, from people, you know, looking at it from a pro-racial angle and getting very upset and getting in that victimization mentality. There's a lot of Lamar Jackson fans or a lot of people in general that say, oh, they're just hating on Lamar Jackson because he's a black quarterback and there's double standards against him. And there's double standards against black athletes for sure, at least a certain amount of them. But at the end of the day, once again, that's where it's your job, if you're an objective or logical analyzer, to say, okay, you know what? Is this something that is more racist or racialized? Or, you know, is this something that actually has substance? And all the criticisms that have been against Lamar Jackson, they've all somewhat been warranted.
Up the door to people like Richard, who says, blah, blah, blah. That door is wide open.
It is.
It was closing, but it's wide open now.
Yep.
And now you still got those naysayers that's out there that's coming out the grave to be able to say these sort of things.
Yeah.
I'm all for Patrick. I'm picking Patrick to win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
I'm all for it. But I was for Lamar in this situation, and I would have loved to see him do way better, man.
But Skip asked us about what did he lose? What did he lose? He lost an opportunity here.
Yes.
I told you last Friday, it's the biggest game he's ever played. What is the opportunity he lost? He still has an opportunity to be one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League.
Absolutely.
Yes. Will he still have a chance to win Super Bowls?
Yes.
Yes, he will.
Sure.
The major loss yesterday was that catch of the dude that's considered the greatest right now. Peyton Manning chased Tom Brady his whole career, trying to chase, not just chase rings, but chase that man.
Yeah.
And Patrick just separated himself from him a little bit. That's all.
Well, Patrick Mahomes, and this is a great talented era of young quarterbacks so far, Patrick Mahomes has been separating himself basically from everybody else, you know, for a very long time now. You know, and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and, you know, Joe Burrow, all those guys are very talented and they could potentially all win a Super Bowl as well. But they're going to have to prove to me and prove to a certain amount of other people that they're anywhere near the Patrick Mahomes level.
When Peyton went over to Denver and won a Super Bowl on the second team.
Because Joe Burrow has not yet proved overall that he can be as consistent as what he needs to be in order to win a Super Bowl. Even though he's a very great quarterback from what I've seen. Lamar Jackson has not proved that he has had the skill set and been able to adjust to that of the elite top-tier defenses as of yet. And Josh Allen, he's just a little bit too turnover prone for my taste. And on top of that, he needs to come up a little bit bigger in some of those latter moments as well. Right now, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league.
He said, "Ooh, I did."
And has been.
Tom Brady didn't do. And we can give him that credit until Tom went to Tampa and took that back from him. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Tom said, I could do that too. Went to Tampa and snatched it back. Ultimately, we're going to measure Peyton Manning and Tom Brady together. I don't care how Lamar chalked this up. Ultimately, you're going to be paired and measured to Patrick Mahomes.
No question.
And you had a chance yesterday to come out of yesterday with 2 MVPs and 1 Super Bowl. Well, he'll have 2 MVPs and 2 Super Bowls. Okay. That would have closed that gap on him.
All right. For me, these are the painful facts.
Well, just to talk about Lamar Jackson debatably being the greatest quarterback of his era, I don't think that personally is ever going to happen. I think that if Lamar Jackson is lucky, I think that he'll be able to win 1 Super Bowl, maybe 1 more MVP. But at the end of the day, that pretty much is the peak for Lamar Jackson. I don't ever see the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson winning multiple Super Bowls. I think that the Baltimore Ravens, that they're going to have to catch lightning in a bottle, kind of like they caught this year. And that's why a lot of people believe that they'll never win a Super Bowl. Because this is the second time that they've caught lightning in a bottle and had great momentum. And that a lot of the times is what winning a great Super Bowl is all about, or winning a Super Bowl or a championship is all about. Sometimes it just might be your year. Or both times it looked to be Lamar Jackson's year, they ended up blowing it. Or getting exposed in certain areas.
They're irrefutable. Lamar has fallen to 2-4 in the postseason.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something overall, once again, that is also very relevant because, once again, I don't see him ever becoming the greatest of his era. I don't ever see him surpassing Patrick Mahomes. But I'm not quite sure if I ever see him beating Josh Allen or that of Joe Burrow either. I mean, if you want to say maybe that he's greater than them just because of the MVPs, you can. But just in terms of ability, no.
Twice he's had the number 1 seed coming off an MVP regular season and failed to get to the Super Bowl. And in the 4 losses he has suffered, the Ravens have averaged 10.5 points a game in those 4 losses.
God, Jesus. That's horrendous. Even Michael Irvin was like, damn.
And in those 4 losses, Lamar has 4 touchdowns to 8 turnovers. I can't.
Absolutely horrendous. And once again, that is why Lamar Jackson overall, a lot of these criticisms are not going to go away.
Defend that.
Yeah, you can't.
Okay. And yesterday, on 3rd down yesterday against that defense, it's a really good defense. It is underestimated, underrated, underhyped, Spags defense. They were number 2 to the Ravens. But on 3rd down yesterday, Lamar went 1 of 6 for 7 yards. It's just not good enough. Look,
that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm giving it to you right there, Michael.
All right. And against the blitz yesterday, he was a season low 48% because Spags just said, I'm coming after you, because he came after him.
Absolutely. That pretty much was the game plan, the exact same game plan that I believe Wade Phillips, if that's his name, that he had against that of Cam Newton, the exact same game plan. And those quarterbacks can never handle that type of game plan, never. So Lamar, he's going to have to become possibly a little bit of a better passer, or he's going to have to try to find a way, and very soon overall, to inhibit his running ability, inhibit his value more than what he can. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's going to work because, those running quarterbacks, they're not going to be allowed to run against those superior defenses.
Bunch.
And this is what I'm talking about.
Okay, this is weird. If you beat it with your legs, if you beat the blitz, you are gone. Yeah.
You're gone. And Lamar just,
And what tore me up was, and I tweeted this in the second game after I watched Brock Purdy go 21 yards, 10 yards, and 21 more yards to ice the game, I tweeted Lamar Purdy. Because I'm being facetious, but Brock Purdy coming out of Iowa State ran a 4.84 40. 4.84. He's obviously not even in Lamar's galaxy when it comes to speed. And yet, that happened, and I can't. I don't think he played poorly. I can't go to poorly, but I'll just say this: he did not have an MVP caliber game yesterday, right? He just.
I'll say that he played poorly. I'm not gonna say that it was the worst that I had ever seen. But at the end of the day, he just didn't play well. It was either an average to below average performance. But at the end of the day, for Lamar Jackson, it wasn't anything that I did not expect. I was hoping, of course, for his sake that it was going to be a little bit better. But once again, when you talk about a quarterback with this type of skill set, there's just not much more that he's going to be able to do.
He played
by his standards, you could say.
By his standards, he played poorly.
All right.
To expect the guy,
he didn't play poorly according to the standards that I have for him, because what that tells me is that you guys don't know who Lamar Jackson is.
Coming in,
once again, there's a completely different level between that of the regular season and the playoffs.
Expected him to come in there and play the way he played the last time we watched him. That's what I expected. I didn't expect, even though he delivered the football, the bomb to Zay Flowers, the shallow cross to Zay Flowers when he or the one down the sideline when Zay Flowers wind up fumbling. I get that part. But when you throw the interception, you hesitate to run, those natural instincts, he should take over the game.
Yeah.
To me, that's playing poor. When you just get ripped off those numbers on third down, that's poor play. You can't win a football game if you 1-6 on third down.
No,
you just can't.
For 7 yards.
No,
it's just
you
not
can't.
good enough.
He ran the ball 8 times yesterday, Lamar, whether they were design runs or scrambles. He only got, his longest run was 21 yards. He only had 54 yards total. The longest was 21.
I thought that he had more than that, but I guess I was wrong.
On the 21, I thought he was gone on it, and he wasn't gone.
He should have had a minimum of 150 yards rushing yesterday. Yes. Minimum of 150 yards, because they were sending people and leaving cavities that you could run up in. Lamar wanted to try to discern and decipher it, as opposed to using his making a decision to just go.
He was hesitant.
First down.
He was very hesitant.
Right. And it was...
But anyways, that's pretty much about it overall for today for that of the Lamar Jackson conversation. I just thought that I would talk about that. I like Lamar Jackson, and I think that he seems to be a decent leader, but at the end of the day, he just does not quite have the skills to pay the bills to beat those elite-level teams. The Patrick Mahomes era right now, which is what it is, they're basically the New England Patriots. They're basically the San Francisco 49ers, during the 80s. The Dallas Cowboys during the 90s. That's what they are. They're the dynasty of this era. So the question is that Lamar Jackson, can you potentially beat that dynasty? We'll see. And of course, not just for Lamar Jackson, but for Josh Allen as well. And potentially Joe Burrow continuing going forward. So we'll see. And Trevor Lawrence and a couple other guys, but we'll see. But Lamar Jackson, of course, because of the hype around him, there's going to be some more pressure on him. Also because of his playing style. And let's also be real, because of some of the people that like to play the victimization mentality and claim racism and all sort of stuff, there's going to be a great target on his back. But we'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. I'll talk to you all later.